Today we're interviewing someone who's had a tangible impact on our regional gaming scene. You know those people in your community who you admire for what they do for other people? That kind of person who gives more of themselves than seems possible? Today we're joined by one of those bright spots in nerd gaming. Ron Davis is a card-carrying Star Wars fanatic. He works a full-time job at West Virginia University, is the father of 3 delightfully nerdy and kind children, husband of 31 years to his incredibly understanding wife Christine, and somehow seems to squeeze 47 hours into every day to run the area's tabletop hub, for Horsemen Comics and Gaming. Ron recently opened back up to limited capacity on May 20th, and we're here to ask him how the pandemic is affecting business, what kind of madness it takes to open a gaming store in the first place, and where the rewards are when he hasn't taken a bona fide paycheck from his store in 10 years. So join us while we interview Ron, and stay tuned till the end for information about our next giveaway.
Welcome to Roleplay Geeks. I'm your host, Frank.
I'm your token hippie, John.
I'm Jim. I got it right this week.
For once, and I'm Steve.
And this is Steve-O, a.k.a. the other Steve.
And this week we're featuring a guest on the show, Ron Davis, who is somebody that has worked with Steven a lot in the past, and is somebody that I think all but maybe Steve-O is somewhat familiar with. And that's because of the reason we're having him on the podcast this week. Ron is the owner and proprietor of a gaming store. Now, I don't think it's much of a stretch to suggest that most gamers at some point have sort of idly dreamed of owning a gaming store. And Ron's going to give us a little bit of an insight into what the reality of that is like. Gamers are very much, but role players in particular, are very much used to creating an idyllic universe in their brain. That's what we do, right? But the reality of living in medieval Europe or something like that would have been probably quite a bit different than the slaying dragons that we normally do. So Ron hopefully will give us a little insight into what really owning a store is like.
Thanks for ruining my, fantasy about living in medieval times.
Well, sometimes the harsh reality has to rain down.
I like how you drew a comparison already between owning a game store in 14th century medieval Europe.
And it includes a plague.
Actually, probably for a gaming store, it probably smells very similar at times. Am I right?
Okay, so just get started. So, Four Horsemen. What's the actual full title, Ron?
We are Four Horsemen Comics and Gaming. That's our whole name.
Everyone calls it the Four Horsemen, or Four
Right.
Horsemen, or 4H in some cases.
Yep.
So the Four Horsemen, for those who don't know, is a gaming store that's located in Morgantown, West Virginia. It's located in what we refer to as the New Mall, but it's 30-year-old building, just because there was an older structure that predated it. And it's been around for how long, Ron?
We have been, we're coming up on 10 years. This October, Halloween is our 10-year anniversary.
So since 2010, and this is you've now moved to your third location within that building, right?
Yes. Yeah, the first one, we were in our first spot. We called it the Closet for about 6 months. And that's when the fire marshal came in and tried to shut us down because we were trying to cram too many people in a little tiny space. So that's when the mall moved us in exile all the way down by Sears.
Didn't like all the torches on the walls or something? Or just
Well, I mean,
It was small.
It was small.
And so one of the things that Ron does in his store, which is not uncommon, is that, as he said, it's comics. So, and obviously because of the focal point of our podcast, that's less of an issue for us. But so we'll sort of push that off to the side and talk a bit about the gaming side. And as we know, gaming is a social endeavor. We get together and we game. And one of the things that's really awesome about Ron's store is that you've got a significant space for people to get together. And that wasn't true in the first iteration, but now that's very much true.
Right. And that's always been, every time that we've even thought about moving somewhere else, it's always with that in mind. We used to have no D&D rooms. Now we have 2. and we have huge open gaming spaces for people, because that's just it's a central part of our mission right now.
So when you started this, did you start this with the idea of comics? Oh yeah, we could do gaming, or gaming? Oh, I guess we should sell comics.
So the way the whole thing really started was my cousin happened to be over at my house one time, and he said, "You know what? You've got enough comics here. You should just start a comic shop." And I, having impulse control problems, I'm like, "Sure, let's do that." So I told a friend of mine what I was going to do, Nick McGinnis, and he's like, "Well, you've got to do magic and games and stuff, because a comic store, you'd never make it just on that." I'm like, I knew nothing about gaming whatsoever. And Nick kind of laid it all out for me. And Nick was actually one of the original 4 Horsemen. Yeah, so it's been a learning curve for me, because I never really did, I didn't play Magic or Pokemon, any of that stuff, growing up. I wasn't really a socially active kid back then. Surprise, surprise. But it has really grown and taken off, though.
So would you say that gaming is, I don't know how to phrase this. I started to say significant portion, and that's pretty much a given. Would you say it's a dominant portion of the store now as opposed to comics?
Yeah, absolutely. If we had tried to do just a comic shop, we'd have made it about 6 months, I think. But gaming is everything. I mean, it's what takes up the bigger part of our space, and it's one of our primary, like I say, our focus.
I remember when Nick was talking about it in the beginning, and he's like, I'm trying to get these ideas, to put to Ron about what we're going to do. And I went, magic.
Yeah.
And he said, And I said, magic. I said, you have to do magic. You have to have magic. And he's like, is it that important? And I was like, yes, for the love of God. Yes, it really is. Sorry, go ahead.
When Nick first said magic, I'm like, I don't know anything about, I was thinking like rabbits out of the hat kind of stuff. And I'm like, why would we have that in a comic store? That makes no sense.
Abracadabra.
Yep.
Abracadabra.
My assistant Missy will saw in half.
Every time I win at Magic from now on, I'm going to yell, abracadabra!
Since that's never happened, James, it's not something you need to remember to do.
I'm young. It can happen one day.
All right, so let's tease a little bit about this magic before we get to John's question, which is, all right, the gaming itself. Would you say that magic is overwhelming the focal point, or it's just one of the mix now?
It's... We try on it, and you're good. You think this is alignment. This is absolute truth. I try to put as much effort into all the games. So I do a lot of focus on Magic, but I put just as much focus on Pokemon and Dragon Ball. If I've got 3 or 4 people that want to form a community, I will throw as much effort as I can into it. But granted, that kind of slices up the time a lot. Now the Magic community is definitely huge. It is probably the biggest community that we have. We have a Facebook group, and it's got 400 or 500 people in it. So it's obviously not all those people come to the store to play all the time, but over 10 years we've got, and people join that group and they stay, and we're all still buds.
Mine actually might be better for later on, but I just kind of wondered about it, because we've talked about how role-playing gaming was when we were kids. Now it's actually become kind of the cool thing to do. I remember going to some gaming shops in Blacksburg, Virginia, down at Virginia Tech. And it was really cool to go into some and, hang out and look at the books and, different RPG systems and everything else. But now I just kind of wonder what the demographics have changed in the 10 years that you've seen.
So when we first started, it really wasn't that prevalent. I mean, I think there were groups. I mean, we had standard groups that would come into play. But in the last 3 to 5 years, it has really, really risen. I mean, it's shot up to the point, like I say, where we've had to put 2 D&D rooms in because we have so many people come out. Before the pandemic, we would have 50 or 60 people every Wednesday out playing D&D, which is
Wow.
crazy. I mean, there's a lot of people, and that's not just us. Our store up in Clarksburg, same thing. I mean, they'd have 50 or 60 people. So, I mean, a lot of people are playing this. And actually, early on, I didn't have a whole lot of experience with gaming before the store, so I was kind of learning all this stuff as I was going along. But one of my earliest memories of a D&D group in the shop was a little boy. He comes in, and he says, "Hey, I'd like to run a D&D group. Can I bring some of my friends in?" I said, "Sure, buddy, that's fine." He said, "I'll be back next week." So I didn't think anything else about it. Week later, he comes back in, full wizard, head to toe, staff, and he's leading this troop, and all these kids are dressed up. There's a barbarian, there's and they all sit down and play. They're doing the voices, and they're hooting and hollering. Everyone in the store just stops and watch this game take place. It was the best day ever.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I have to say on that, I do have to say my wife never experienced role-playing or anything like that. And so now that we are role-playing since SARS-CoV-2, we do everything through Discord here. And sometimes she'll come by, and the other night she's saying to me, she's like, "I don't know, I'm really kind of disappointed." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Well, you guys don't do the voices or anything else, or doing all..." She was expecting us to wear a wizard hat or have an axe and wave around, doing voices and everything. I said,
we should do that. We should do that at least once.
Steve-O and Jim have been doing voices with some of their characters when doing Frank's campaign. And so we do some of that, but not quite to that extent. But that is awesome. That is totally awesome.
Yeah.
I have to tell my wife that. She'll get a kick out of that.
I'm all up for, dressing up as long as I don't have to see Jimmy in a loincloth. So
Yeah, no barbarian for Jimmy.
How did you know that was my first choice?
Let's just blanket say none of us need to be wearing a loincloth.
Right.
None of us.
Right.
Well, I wear my loincloths around my forehead.
Okay, so let's get back to some more stuff about the store. And I'm just kind of curious. So you've experimented with a lot of different gaming things. And like you said, you started with, I don't know anything. So let's try this. Right. Let's try that. Let's try the other thing. What are some things that you figured out to do in presenting gaming to our community, our greater community? And because presumably, let's be honest here, one of the things that's wonderful about gaming in the 21st century is that it is a endeavor that is exploding and pulling in people constantly instead of being very isolated as it was when most of us were younger. So what are some things that you've found in doing this in the last 10 years that worked? People should be doing that type of stuff in their store.
Honestly, the biggest thing that has worked for me is part of the reason for the success of the store is my absolute ignorance of all of this. I would rely on the community. I'm like, "Hey guys, what do you need? We need a 6 foot, high table. Great, I'll go get one." So I would listen to, the needs of the community, the different games that are coming out. I mean, there's a wealth of information out there, and there's no way for one person to keep on top of all of it at any given time. So, listening to the folks that are coming in, what's got their attention. Yeah, sure, we'll run that. There was a My Little Pony card game. I was like, that's never going to work. And it worked. Okay. Steve still buys it.
Of course it worked.
So let's get the flip side of that question. What are some things that you tried that, just didn't really work? It's certainly not as well as you hoped.
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Yeah. I mean, there's varying degrees of failure, I guess. I mean, there's, I don't know that we've had anything that's just been an absolute disaster. I mean, we try to do midnight release parties and things like that. Some of that kind of stuff doesn't work, which is kind of weird because generally most of our communities are getting up at 11 o'clock at night and they're powering through until 5 or 6 in the morning. So, it's interesting. Nothing really comes to mind as far as spectacular failures go. I'm sure there's been a lot though.
You've tried to bury that, repress that memory.
Yeah, it's all repressed.
Sure.
It's beautiful.
Okay, so let's get into some of the harder questions, if you don't mind. Which, again, with the idea if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I'd like to open a gaming store, let's talk about the more ugly side of this, which is starting off. I'm going to go ahead and make a presumption. I don't know Ron super well, but I don't think he's a multimillionaire. And I don't think he's a multimillionaire based upon this store.
No.
So, let's right size people's expectations as far as profits and things like that.
So when I first started doing this, I've always been of the mindset that I don't take a whole lot of risks. So I researched the whole thing for a year. I went to conventions. I talked to anybody that possibly could. I got as much information as I could. Nobody wanted to talk about it at all. I would be like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. I was super excited. And they're like, don't do it. I'm like, that's a terrible attitude. Why? And I only had one bit of advice from a dealer. I think it was like Baltimore somewhere. He said, if you can take $20,000 into your driveway and light it on fire, and that doesn't bother you, open a game store. and I tell that to everybody. So yeah. And we're, like I say, we're coming up on 10 years now, and you guys are not going to believe this. There still has not been a payday for me. Everything that the store makes goes back into the store, into supporting the communities, just doing stuff, because it takes a lot to keep the lights on. We've bumped up the staff, but most of it just goes right back into the store, building new programs, and the indie rooms are not cheap, believe it or not.
Jeez.
So
yeah.
To say this is a labor of love is a disgusting understatement, really.
Yeah, it really is. If I had to rely on this as income, I mean, it couldn't support me. It just doesn't.
Couldn't afford the cardboard box.
Yeah.
For your second story.
Yeah.
Hey, and this really does mimic a lot of other. I guess the word I want to use is niche marketing or retail establishments. I know many years ago, Steve-O had a music store, for example, and that I imagine he could tell you in that area, it's not radically different, that it's
labor of love.
Labor of love.
Yep.
You're not going to get rich off of it. And, both Jim and John have worked, I know, at a bookstore that doesn't exist anymore. And the guy who used to run that would tell you, you do it because you love it, not because you want to make a lot of money at it.
Yeah, John worked there. I just sort of lounged around like, an unkept.
Read the books for free.
Yeah.
Right. and then
read.
Yeah.
Air quotes read.
Yeah. And then Steven, he's worked at a few gaming stores over the years when he was younger. So this is I think even with the explosion of interest in this hobby, you've been doing the last 10 years, so you've got the most recent experience, and it's, that's still your experience, that this is not a wealth generator. No,
and it's, and to compound that, I mean, I have a full-time job. I work for the university, and that's 9 to 5, and then the store has to take up after that. So it is not uncommon for the last 10 years, from 5 o'clock until midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, I am for Horsemen. I was out that store last night. I'm covered in paint. Yeah, but I was out there till about 1 or 2 in the morning, and I get up 7 o'clock the next day and keep going.
So what keeps you going? I mean, you got no money, you got no payday, and then so it's not for the money, right?
Sadism.
And you're engaged in a lot of endeavor that, like you said, you don't have any real background in. It's not something that you grew up always wanting to do. So what keeps that going?
It is all about the people. And it sounds so corny, and it to me it didn't sound corny, but it literally is the people. Since this store has come into being, I've seen friendships, I've seen marriages, I've seen babies that came into being because people met at the store, because the store existed. Right? No.
We've had some close calls.
Like during a masquerade vampire or whatever.
Yeah, there's been a few critical fails on equipment there.
But yeah, I mean, that's for me. It's the people, it's the communities. There's a nonstop string of good stories that I could tell about the people that I've met and the people that hang out there.
Well, definitely the one about the kid coming in dressed up with his friends and stuff. That is just awesome. That is really stellar.
Okay, so we've kind of danced around some of the community as treating it sort of monolithically, and then talked a little bit about people who do this, people who do that, and I'm kind of curious how well the different communities intermingle. So I know, having danced around some of different gaming communities, some communities I've not found comfortable for me personally. That's just not how I approach gaming. And
Sure.
So what's that like? The fact that you've got a Star Wars role-playing game community over here, but you've also got the Star Wars miniatures game community over here, and then there's the Magic guys over there, and all that stuff. How does that work?
We have learned that we can't have certain groups on the same day because, for whatever reason, there is just natural tension between those groups.
Oh, wow. Well, give us some examples. I got to know.
Absolutely not.
Of all the questions you could have followed up with, Steve, of all of
man, I gotta
he
know.
loves the community. He doesn't take a paycheck. He does this. He works his ass to the bone. Oh, so tell us an actual explicit example of
This is what
douchebaggery
you
at the
call an
store.
in-depth interview, man.
That's gotcha
they're-
journalism. That's what that is.
I mean,
Well,
they're
assuming that the Star Trek community and the Star Wars community can't be next to each other.
actually they do okay. We've had problems when, if we have two miniatures groups, we've only got finite miniatures tables, so there's natural tension there. I have no memory left whatsoever, so I'll have the problem of, I'll schedule a tournament of like, oh sure, we'll just schedule another one and another one, and then come Saturday there's 500 people and we're looking for chairs. So I do that a lot, and my staff hates me for that. There are groups that we try to schedule to give them the run of the place because they just spread out. There's not a lot of like, we have a Vampire Masquerade. They come out on Monday nights, and let me tell you, the first time they came out, they scared the hell out of me because I don't know what was going on. I walk in the back door and there's like an executioner. I was like, what's going on? But super cool guys. All these communities, they're really great. Even when there are fights and arguments, they are at least civil. I mean, there's not table flipping anymore.
Oh, that's good. Wow.
That's another story I want to hear.
That's
After the show.
Let's tease that out a little bit, though. I mean, what have you had to do to tamp down some of the negative aspects of nerd rage? Negative aspects that sometimes manifest themselves in gaming, particularly if you have anything competitive, that where there's a winner and a loser.
Right. So if it's a concentration between groups, we try to separate them a little bit, give them a little bit of a buffer if possible. We've had problems with, like, we had tournament software in the middle of the giant tournament. The tournament software itself did something really weird and screwed up some of the rankings. So the people that we thought were first place were like second or third, and that almost caused a riot. I mean, that was a bad night for us. And we just, I would rather make sure that somebody's having a good experience, even if it costs me whatever, so I just throw packs of whatever or product, or make that problem go away, make them happy. That's just it. Make them happy.
Oh man, I really wish I knew that and had that ability to do that, because I'm in the Boy Scouts and in the Cub Scouts. When you do those Pinewood Derbies, man, you mess up the rankings there. Those people are crazy, man. They will riot. They will throw down. I just need to have like a bunch of really cool looking cards to throw at them and say, "Here you go, here you go." That's a good solution.
Yeah.
So I got two more hard questions, and then we'll get back to the to sugarcoat a little bit more. And this is probably not fair for me to ask of one store owner.
Well,
but
then don't.
There is a problem within our gaming community of being fairly gender dominant.
Right.
And so what?
Did you say gender or ginger?
Hey, come on.
Sorry.
What steps have you found have been useful in trying to pull in a more diverse group?
Honestly, that is probably, I mean, we've partnered with diversity groups before, trying to kind of level that playing field. But you're right. We are. It's a male dominated industry, and I really wish that we saw more. But my believe it or not, when we first moved, my wife started a ladies only D&D campaign. She was the first one in one of the new D&D rooms, and that was great. And so many girls would come up like, "Hey, we saw those posts. Girls play this? Yes, they do. Come on out." But we don't see a whole lot of variation in the games, and I really, if you guys got any ideas, I'm open to try just about anything. We've tried ladies' nights and things like that, but yeah.
Would you say this is resistance of the community, or what do you think is stymieing your efforts a bit there? Is it resistance of the community, or that the people that you're trying to pull in just are I don't want to use the word ignorant, but unaware, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's stereotypes. I think they look back and they see a bunch of guys playing Magic. They're like, "Oh, that's a guy thing. Well, I wouldn't have fun doing that." But we do have a couple ladies that come out to play some of the games, and they have a ball at it. I don't think fun is exclusive to one gender or another, and I think everybody can benefit from some of these games. But I just don't know how to kind of bring those folks in.
That surprises me a little bit too, considering how many, female-oriented, especially YA novels that are fantasy and science fiction these days. You think about Hunger Games.
Oh yeah.
There's a ton of them out there that seem to be more geared toward teenage girls these days.
Well, it's definitely changing because, my daughter plays and she enjoys it. My son plays at high school. Well, when he was in high school, he just graduated. But in his gaming groups, they had girls in his groups. Now, when we were growing up, you wouldn't find a girl within 20 miles of a game.
Yeah.
It just
wasn't.
wasn't.
I think that it's...
Well, we were in a small town, so you would find one within 20 miles, but completely incidental.
And now you see it a whole lot, and you even have things like Critical Role, who really tout the fact that they have a really even balance, relatively speaking, between guys and girls.
John, do you have a question?
Yeah, no, my question's kind of odd, and you may not know, since you weren't into gaming earlier and stuff. So a big deal when we were gaming, when we were kids in the 70s, basically the 80s, was the huge pushback by the kind of religious community. And so, there was the movie with Tom Hanks, what is it, Tunnels and Trolls or whatever that was. And I even had my mother, come and ask me at one point, is this devil worship stuff? Is this, and it was really a big deal. But have you had any issues with parents coming in like, is this stuff devil worship? Or, have you had a lot of issues? Has this become a problem at times?
Yeah. In 10 years, I've maybe had 2 or 3 conversations. And they were, legitimately fact-finding. It was like, hey, you sold my son a player's handbook. What are you doing? Are you trying to get him into a cult? No, I'm trying to get him to slay some dragons. That sounds awesome. But I don't think that stigma exists anymore with things like Stranger Things that have really, kind of opened it up to the mainstream. I think a lot of those fears have been dispelled. Now we've got actual problems to fight, not
that
made
was,
up ones.
Back in the days of the satanic panic. Those were the days when people also thought you could play LP records backwards and hear, satanic messages. And there were books written on the subject. And again, it's all about fear. People are trying to scare you to think the way they think, my parents, asked me the same question. I think the 700 Club had a copy of the original DM's Guide and was talking about how this had spells and all this stuff and it was culty. And my parents asked me, and I just laughed about it. And I'm like, man, it's a game. And in fact, my very first game was with our youth group pastor. And incidentally, back in the early days, we had a lot of girls that played because they were part of the youth group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those days because we have those people come into our elementary school and do the record playing backwards, and I just thought Satan had a speech impediment. I just think he doesn't know how to talk right.
Yeah, we had one particular kid did that.
Yeah,
People really believe that, though, man.
Oh yeah.
Well, it was-
and our Boy Scout group meets in a church, and they play. They have a huge group, so I just don't think it's an issue anymore. I think John's right though, or Steve-O's right. Both of them are right that it was huge back when we were kids. I mean, I had issues.
So that time period, I've decided to dub first wave gamerism. Just that's what it is.
trademark.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
There we go.
Noted.
So let's go to the second hard question that I had, which is it's very topical and hopefully will not be an issue for any other person looking to engage in opening a store ever in their entire lives, which is the pandemic. So how, given that this endeavor is inherently everybody gets together and does stuff, how has this negatively impacted your store? I can't imagine it's positively impacted it much.
all the negative. That's how bad. And like I say, one of the real reasons, one of the joys that I get out of this is seeing people and talking to people and kind of getting out. It's just me and Caleb in the store. So I mean, we've tried to do things like with Zoom meetings and Discord and all that. We're still able to keep people together. So we're not across the table from each other. Now we're across town, but we're still able to stay connected. And that's a good thing. From the store standpoint, we have, people ask how the store's doing, what the health is. And, we have all of the bills of being open full time now, but about half of the revenue. So that's the reality of the situation right now. It is rough. So we're, we tighten the belts and we're making it work, and we're going to be fine. I think everything's going to work out eventually. We're hoping to start doing some smaller scale events real soon to kind of open that stuff back up. But yeah, the pandemic has been rough. The scariest thing for me was whenever we would see, I'm on, retailer groups for all this stuff, and, you have every week somebody else closing up shop. And I would love to see a gaming store in every single town across the country. But the longer this goes on, the harder and harder it is, because this is people's livelihood. Like I say, if I had to rely on this, it would employ me and maybe one person. That would be it. But luckily, I've got the university to rely on, and so I'm able to keep the lights on with a real minimal amount of help. But the reality is, the longer this goes on, the grimmer things get.
Yeah, were you able to get any funds from the government out of that bailout stuff? I know my company did.
Yeah, we did get a little bit of it.
Yeah, we didn't get much.
It was such a confusing process. It was so weird.
Yeah.
It was, and I've gotten like 5 emails this week that I've got to read, because every email is from the same company. It's like, oh, new guidelines, new updates. And we have no idea. And the worst part of it is, we're trying to follow the Mon County Health Department rules and regulations. They don't really have a good idea. They're just like, nope, you got to do this, and that's it. So we're trying to kind of challenge some of those guidelines, because I don't think they sort of apply to us, but they don't apply to us. You go to a restaurant and you got 50 people in it. Our store's allowed to have 2. So I don't. Yeah, we're allowed, I think, 2 people per 1,000 square feet, and we have 6,000 square feet, so we can have 12 people in the store at any one time. Other than that, people have to wait outside. But yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the retailer thing you mentioned. That's kind of interesting. So my perception, maybe incorrectly, and I think this is, again, maybe an incorrect perception, but a relatively new phenomenon, meaning in the last 20 years or so, that we talk about it as a gaming store, but in reality, it's almost like a gaming club, right?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
It's a clubhouse.
Yep. That is a perfect description of what it is. I always kind of cringe when I call it a shop or a store or whatever, because that's not really what it is. It's more of a community center. We just happen to sell stuff. That's the way I've always approached it. I would rather be considered, a meeting space or a community house or something along those lines, and not just a retail.
So a community center that sells stuff to keep the lights on.
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah.
That succinctly puts it. I like to encapsulate it there. So.
Yeah.
So what role do you think, or what role has the people who publish this stuff? What role have they played in developing that sense of community, developing that clubhouseness? Wizards of the Coast and Steve Jackson Games and all the other people who are publishing all these different games.
It depends on the publisher. Some of the publishers have really stepped up and done an amazing job at trying to make sure that the retail outlets stay whole. Other ones are like, we're going to sell our stuff on Amazon. Good luck. And those are the ones that, when this is all said and done, I think there's going to be, people are going to remember, which companies stood by us during all this.
Care
you
to
mentioned
drop any names?
Well, Wizards of the Coast has actually done an amazing job, and Wizards gets beat up a lot, but they have done probably over all of our partners. They've probably done the best job by throwing us, promos that we can hand out. They've given us instructions on how to get the online version of Magic up and running to kind of keep the community still together during all this. So they've done an amazing job. I have a box of, they've sent us 18 free boosters of product that we can turn around and sell or use for incentives or whatever to kind of help us out, which is, for us, it's incredible. They've done a really, really good job. But yeah, there's been some other ones that haven't done so well. Comics.
What's it like dealing with all those different companies? And in the sense of, is it interesting to have a wide variety? And I'm not talking about just in response to the issue that we're having right now. I'm just talking about in the last 10 years. Do you like the notion of this vibrant community of lots of different publishers, or is it more frustrating than you thought it would be?
It's nice to have access to, this plethora, this open field of stuff. But when it's time to order something and I have to remember to call 18 different distributors, and I have to have, this guy, I have to order at least 500 to get free shipping. This guy wants 3,000. That guy wants, instead of having one central place to order stuff, it's a little rough because, there are some people that only deal with the X-Wing miniatures or Fantasy Flight games. So I have to order specifically from them. HeroClix is over here. We get all of our Magic product from this company. So it's a lot to keep in your head, and when there's not a lot of room left upstairs, it's kind of rough.
You must be following the experiencing Jimmy.
He just described the space I live in every day.
Right. You got the same haircut.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, baby, gorgeous.
So, you mentioned something there that I think is really interesting, and this has been a frustration for me as a gamer. That is inherent in the hobby. There's nothing can be done about that. But that I love gaming. I absolutely love gaming. I've always loved gaming. If I could do something for a living, it would be some form of something with gaming. And I really love the idea of something like Magic the Gathering, even though I have frustrations and issues with it. I love the idea of HeroClix. I love comic books, so HeroClix is a wonderful thing. I love D&D, play it a lot. I love role-playing games. I love X-Wing miniatures. I love. And if I loved all that stuff, I would have to be a multimillionaire to even do anything remotely in half of them. It's a very resource-intensive hobby. So what role can a gaming store provide in helping people sort of develop their focal point, if you will?
Yeah, so for me, this has been a central tenet of the store forever. Case in point, Wizards will send us these widgets. We only get 10. You can take these widgets and sell them on Amazon for $500-600. We make a whole lot of money. Great. Nobody in the local community would get one. So it's always been our mantra to when we get something, we sell it at MSRP. And that has kind of gone out into the wild. Like, oh crap, they're selling it for $20 instead of $500, and they go like that. But we service a local community first before we I would rather make the local folks happy than try to gouge them. It's not worth an extra $100. If somebody else is if I'm gonna make somebody's day by sacrificing a little bit of money, absolutely, let's do that. And I think too often we have stores that lose sight of that. We got into this because we love this stuff. And, at the end of the day, we're looking at the checkbook and there's no money and it's, I can make a quick buck over here. I would encourage shops to, take that hit, just take a little bit of a hit. If you can afford it, take the hit, make people happy. And, it will build the community. And once you got the community around you, you'll be fine. But
for sure. Yeah, that's actually how I met Ron. We were talking before the show. The first time I ever met Ron, and I won't say we really met, he just sort of walked up to me inside of his store. My son and I had stopped by because we just started playing the X-Wing game. And he just walked up to us, handed us 2 tickets for opening day for the Avengers movie. And, my son just remembers that to this day. It was just a wonderful moment. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So definitely you got us as customers.
Awesome.
Yep.
And yeah, like I say, it's just I would rather keep the community happy than I'll figure the money out later. The money's if I wanted to be rich, I wouldn't have a game store.
Okay, Steve has a question.
Is there anything, Ron, that the community, if you were speaking to the community right now, hopefully they're listening to our podcast, is there anything that we can do to help you? To help you stay in business, to help you, help the community?
I haven't really publicly said this yet, but when all this stuff started going down, one by one, initially I was like, this is it. There's no way we're going to be able to function. We're done. I'll try to keep it alive for another month or so. Then we got to shutter the doors. But my phone started blowing up. It's like, what do you need? I want to buy a gift certificate. I want to buy this. I just meet me in the Kroger parking lot and give me some stuff. I'll throw some $100 bills at you. And the rallying of the community, I don't know that everybody knows, but everybody did that. There was so much of an outpouring of support. It was the best feeling ever that, we do matter. People really want us to stick around, and people went out of their way to make sure that we're going to be open at the end of this. And I am personally appreciative of everything everybody's done, and everybody knows who they are because, like I say, everybody that I've talked to has just been tremendous through this, and just the support that they're giving now, just keep that coming.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
really
and
awesome.
I think Stephen and I talked a little bit about something we want to do. I think we're going to start just stopping by Ron's shop from time to time, buying a bunch of stuff and giving away as promo items. It's going to require you guys to send us some emails, send us some love, and we'll start passing some of this stuff out
to our listeners. You guys, he means our listeners.
Yeah, listeners, not you.
I thought you were going to give me
just
something.
Show up for 5 seconds.
Okay, so yeah, and we may do contests. We'll see how that rolls out, and it'll be a fun thing, I think, for everyone to get engaged in doing.
Yeah.
So here's a personal question for you, Ron. So you started off 10 years ago not being a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
10 years later, would you call yourself a gamer?
I still consider myself a novice in all this stuff. My daughter taught me to play Pokemon. She beat my ass. I've learned to play Magic.
I feel your pain.
Actually, wait a minute. I taught my wife how to play Magic. She beat my ass. I'm really bad at gaming.
I feel your pain, brother.
So is there any game in particular that you've watched people play and you go, I'd like to try that, and you tried it and said that's a lot more fun than I was really realized?
Role-playing, D&D. Honestly, I just started my very first D&D campaign. We have another show that I'm on called Horsemen of Roleplay, and they finally got me nailed down for a couple hours a week to play. And I got to tell you guys, how have I lived this long without playing this game? Holy cow. It is so much fun. It
What's
really
your character?
is. I am a tiefling
Nice.
Something or other. Yeah. Oz, my character, he's got some issues.
Yep.
I don't know how, but usually I end up either soiling myself or cross-dressing. I don't know what that means about my character. That has happened so many times.
Oh, you would fit right in one of our adventures.
Yeah.
You'd probably end up leading us into battle.
That's probably true.
Assuming you live long enough.
Right.
So, there's so much more we could talk about in this episode, and so many more things we could ask you about, and particularly on the retail side, I think that's a thing that we gamers don't think a lot about. You know, you go and you buy a player's handbook from Wizards of the Coast. You don't, actually. You buy a player's handbook from a retail establishment, and they've got a relationship with Wizards of the Coast, and they're trying to develop a relationship with you. I think it's fair to say that this point of sale is the first entry point into the relationship between the gamer and the store. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yeah. If somebody's first impression of the store, if we can provide a welcoming environment, I mean, D&D may not be their thing, but that may be what they're coming in for. Maybe they're really going to be into minis. They just don't know it yet. So I think it kind of falls on us to be almost that in the know friend, that they're coming to. It's like, hey, I've heard about this thing on TV. Can you show me a little bit more about this? It's over here. And we've also got minis. We've also got board games. We got this and this and this. So you're right. It is more of a relationship. It's kind of feeling out, where they want to go, what they want to explore, and kind of helping along on the adventure.
So, and Ron Shop has, there's a whole comic thing, and there's lots of stuff going on in the comic world right now that obviously we could talk about. It's not really the focal point of this particular podcast, but this retail landscape is very much in flux even before the pandemic, and since then it's become even more so. Please, if you're listening, go out and support your local shop. Whether you're listening locally, go out to Ron Shop. If you're listening somewhere else, support your local shop. It's important to get engaged in the community if you can, because it's a communal endeavor that we're engaged in, and why not tap into that wonderful resource if you can?
Yeah, and I cannot stress it enough.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yep.
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, I just can't stress that enough. If you're not local to Morgantown, find a game store. You will find friends you never knew you had. You will find interests you never knew you had. It just opens up a whole new world. Support your local shops.
Is there any other last minute things you want to tell us, Ron? Something that we didn't ask you about, you were kind of hoping to talk about, or anything like that?
So I guess the big question is if there's anybody out there listening kind of waffling on, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? It sounds like it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hassle. Ron never gets to play because he's always working until 3 o'clock in the morning. Do it anyway. Do it. And it's, people always ask you if you could go back 10 years and, would you still do it? Absolutely. Is it a lot of work? 100%. I wish I could sleep, but it's worth it. It's worth it, every single bit of it. Yeah, just do it. Don't worry about the money. The money will come from somewhere. Probably.
Probably.
All right.
Are we doing the 12 questions, Frank?
I'm just getting to that.
Am I jumping the gun again?
Yes.
Way to go, Jimmy.
All right, so we have a segment on the show that is 12 questions, and we're asking 12 questions of all of our guests. And Steve-O, take it away.
All right, Ron, these will be interesting answers. You've already maybe described some of them, but I have one question before we start the RPG dozen.
All right.
Do you have any Traveler stuff in your shop?
We did. I don't think we have any currently, no. Sorry.
Nobody carries that stuff.
Nobody has Traveler.
Yeah.
I always
stuff.
wander in stores, and if they have anything Traveler, I'll buy it.
Every time I go in Ron's
Just
store,
saying.
I'm really upset that they don't have like an original copy of Star Frontiers that went out of print in the 1980s, or like How to Play in Sanskrit. Those kinds of.
Yeah.
But anyway, on to the Roleplay dozen.
Not a big seller. Okay, Ron. So what was the very first tabletop RPG you ever played, and what kind of character did you play?
Oh, wow. Nick McGinnis tried to get me to play a game, and honest to God, I can't remember what the premise was. I can't remember what the character was. It was a...
Was it Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay?
Yeah, that was it. That was the first one, and I had no idea what was going on. And I was crippled with options. I was like, give me 2 doors and I'll choose one. You just can't say, I've dropped in a world, now what do you want to do? Because I just didn't know what to do. So yeah, it was that Warhammer one, Fantasy Roleplay. Yep, in the basement of the library, I believe.
Do you prefer the game master or play?
I've never been the game master, and I am not smart enough to do that. I realize, knowing what I do to my DM. Oh, hats off, man. I don't know how people can do that, because holy cats, like herding cats. No.
Actually, that is the perfect way to describe it.
It's like herding tigers that are wet and pissed off.
and on
hungry,
fire.
And hungry.
Yeah. And something is on their tail.
Something's on fire.
Okay,
at the
Ron.
same
Next
time.
question. What is your favorite gaming moment?
Oh, it wasn't even mine. One of the folks I do another podcast for, we do Nerd Life, and one of the characters on there basically described one of his gaming moments where he basically, for a brief moment in time, was a Jedi and threw a house at somebody, which is kind of cool.
That doesn't sound very Jedi-like, actually, to throw a house at somebody.
Maybe kind of Sith, yeah.
It might have been a Sith that he was throwing the house at.
It's kind of like
Oh, yeah.
Superman, Man of Steel, Jedi.
Yeah.
Right.
Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to switch to another one. What makes gaming special to you, and what makes you keep wanting to play?
Just hang out with friends. It really is. God, I sound so corny saying that out loud. It's just getting together, and it's just having a good time. I mean, I think we probably in game we probably get like 5 minutes ahead every session, but we play for 2 hours. It's so much fun.
That's a familiar story.
Yeah.
Yep. So what was your least favorite moment in a game?
It was probably in the Warhammer Fantasy where I felt so out of place and like so unprepared for what I was going to be able to do. I didn't really know anything going into it. And it was very daunting, and I can see why people have trepidations, but just go with the flow and stick with it. It's a lot of fun.
Next question. What kind of games do you play now, and why?
Oh, I wish I could play everything. And here is the biggest downside of having a store like this is you don't have time to play anything. You can participate and you can kind of get the things going, but after that you're behind the scenes making sure nothing burns to the ground. I would love to play games. I don't really play a whole lot right now. I mean, I try to do the D&D sessions because those are right now. That's got my attention. Card games. I don't get to play too many card games. I love the art. I mean, I love getting the cards in and seeing the new stuff and trying to keep up with some of the lore. But probably D&D right now.
All right, so I'm sorry, Steve, we've run a little bit long, and we'll have to stop there. Ron, I really want to thank you for being on the show and talking to us a little bit about, I think, what may be every gamer's secret retirement fantasy, and giving us a little bit of an insight into what that really looks like and the challenges contained therein. Yet, I think your advice is wonderful. Do it anyway.
Do it anyway. Yep.
That's right. It's been great having you on the show,
Yep.
Ron.
I appreciate it, guys. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, really quick. I just want to say to Frank, 4 words.
Yeah.
Axis and allies and dice. That's all I'm saying.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. Make sure to hit us with a thumbs up or rating wherever you listen. You can always tune in to see what we're up to on Twitter at Geeks Roleplay, Facebook at Roleplay Geeks, or on the web at roleplaygeeks.com.
And now, information about loot. From June 26 to July 6, we're taking entries for our 4 Horsemen giveaway. One random winner will receive a 4 Horsemen t-shirt, a set of beautiful blue dice, and a pack of martial powers and races spellbook cards for Dungeons & Dragons. A total $40 value. Free to the lucky name drawn from one of Jimmy's many hats.
Please submit name via email with subject 4 Horsemen to roleplaygeeks at roleplaygeeks.com. Giveaway restricted to the contiguous 48 United States. No take-backsies, void where prohibited.